Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're not just sitting down to read a story. We're diving headfirst into a literal linguistic mystery, one that's hidden inside what looks like a completely broken digital transcript of a Bengali fairy tale. You see, our source material is supposedly the transcript of a story called The Lucky Princess, but what we actually found inside the data is completely wild. It's this perfect, chaotic collision of ancient myth and modern tech failure. And we're going to unpack this today because it really exposes those invisible seams, the hidden flaws in the AI technology that we're relying on more and more every single day. We don't start with your traditional once upon a time. Instead, we're hit with this chaotic wall of repetitive text extracted right from our source. It raises a glaring mystery right off the bat. Imagine opening a book and instantly getting hit with a stuttering, nonsensical loop of words. This is supposed to be this rich cultural tale of a princess, right? But the system processing the audio essentially flatlined right out of the gate, spitting out a frantic, looping error instead of an actual narrative. So how on earth do we make sense of a fairy tale when the words themselves have turned into this digital maze? Well, let's play digital archaeologist for a bit. We're going to sift through all this algorithmic noise, try to find the ghost of the original story, and figure out exactly what this text is telling us about the sheer breakdown of machine translation, especially when it hits low fidelity or complex cross-lingual audio. All right, let's get into Section 1, the Lucky Princess Artifact. When you hear the title of a fairy tale, you naturally expect, a structured journey. Characters, a majestic setting, an actual plot. But that grand promise absolutely collides with the fragmented reality of this auto-generated text. Instead of a majestic opening worthy of The Lucky Princess, the transcription machinery completely breaks down immediately and spits out this bizarre, honestly hilarious combo of words. Hey, hey, PTA Rajar. Seriously, the solemnity of an ancient tale gets instantly hijacked by casual greetings and modern acronyms. And to really put this breakdown into perspective, in this entire artifact, this central character, Babin Rajkumari, the Lucky Princess, appears exactly one time, just one single time, right at the very beginning of the transcript. She gets mentioned, and before her epic journey can even get off the ground, the text nosedives into algorithmic repetition. It's actually a pretty deep narrative irony. The main character was basically exiled from her own fairy tale by a confused algorithm that just couldn't understand her language. Which brings us to Section 2, the king's fragmented appearance. Okay, so the princess shows up exactly once, but what about the king? Well, we find this exact dramatic sequence where Rajar, the king, makes his abrupt entrance right in the middle of those weird greetings and technical acronyms I just mentioned. For Hey Hey, PTA Rajar. It's literally like a grand royal entrance being intercepted by a broken radio signal. The AI is hearing something in the original audio, totally failing to parse the Bengali phonetic structure, and apparently just wildly guessing that a parent-teacher association is somehow hanging out in the royal court. And when we actually map out these royal story elements against the rest of the text, a stark reality pops up. The characters, the plot, the entire mythos, they're reduced to a tiny 5% sliver of existence in the data. And that massive remaining 95%, just pure, unadulterated system static. The narrative isn't just struggling to survive here, it is quite literally being swallowed whole by the machine, which is clearly prioritizing its own digital hiccups over human storytelling. Let's move on to Section 3, the Chorus of Four. So if the real characters aren't the stars of this text, who or what is? Well, the crucial point here is the staggering repetition of the word for and its minor variations. It acts like this broken, endless chorus throughout the whole artifact. But the mechanical mutation of it is what's truly fascinating. The primary loop just cycles blindly through for, and capitalized for. But then you can see the system start to struggle. It stretches the sound into 4e, and then, in this desperate attempt to map its confusion to a real dictionary word, it occasionally hallucinates the word foreign. The machine is literally just pacing endlessly in a phonetic trap. This extreme imbalance in the data proves that this algorithmic output is absolutely no longer about a lucky princess. The system entirely abandoned her narrative for an endless repetitive sound. It's like the transcription model fell into a mechanical groove, like a needle skipping on a scratched vinyl record, and just straight up gave up on trying to decode the actual meaning of the audio track. Moving right along to Section 4, strange technical anomalies. But get this, it's not just the word for. Hidden inside this repetitive chorus, we found these bizarre intrusions that have absolutely no business being in a traditional fairy tale. Take, for instance, the sudden appearance of Ma, which is the standard abbreviation for milliampere hour, the unit that measures a battery's electric charge. This is a purely technical, modern artifact dropped directly into the middle of an ancient story structure. Why does this happen? Because the AI's modern training data is actively bleeding into the translation. It hears a Bengali syllable it doesn't recognize, panics, and desperately maps it to a common tech abbreviation it knows from scanning millions of modern web pages. We also see these other completely unexplained fragments sprinkled in, like a random standalone N or that PTA we saw earlier. And guys, this is exactly why this matters for anyone relying on AI tools. This is what it looks like when language models hallucinate without contextual guardrails. Instead of interpreting the narrative flow of a fantasy story, the system is just blindly grabbing random fragments from its training data, like battery specs and school meetings, and tossing them onto the page just to fill the phonetic silence. And finally, Section 5, the echo of speech. Yet, even within all this chaos, there is this strangely fascinating mechanical progression. As we look at the final segments of the text, a new pattern emerges. It actually seems to reflect the system itself trying to process audio, almost like it's becoming self-aware of its own failure. We are literally witnessing a machine slowly struggling to piece together the actual word's speech. It starts off as spee, drags agonizingly into spee, stretches out to spee, and finally spits out speech. It is stuttering on a digital level, trying to label the very task it's failing to do. Reading this exact, completely unedited line from the source material highlights this surreal, almost poetic outcome of an algorithm that has just completely lost the plot. 444 speech, speech 444 speech. Honestly, it reads less like an error log and way more like avant-garde poetry. But in reality, it is just the textual exhaust of a failing machine desperately grasping at linguistic straws. It's the ultimate symbol of man versus machine transcription. So what you should really take away from this explainer is that this strange document isn't just a funny glitch. It's a fascinating snapshot of what happens when human myth meets a very confused machine. It highlights this wild contrast between our deep human desire for storytelling and the cold, unfeeling nature of a processing loop. Because as we rapidly digitize ancient cultures, dialects, and languages using these automated tools, we have to stop and ask ourselves, are we actually preserving these stories, or are we just trapping them in a meaningless looping chorus of war fort? It really leaves us wondering about the fragility of storytelling in the digital age. Technology doesn't always act as a perfect mirror. Sometimes it completely shatters the image. So what happens to our oldest stories when they get lost in the maze of digital translation and algorithmic noise? I hope this invites you to look a little closer the next time you rely on auto-generated text, and maybe question what human element might be getting lost in the static. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.